From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. The 5-year-old civil war in Syria is having a profound impact on the politics of that ever unstable area of the world. But it also threatens the destruction of priceless, irreplaceable historical and cultural artifacts and sites, the genocide of many Christians and non-Islamic minorities in that area, and an exodus of refugees that appears to be almost historic in size. Our guests today on Inside Politics are a trio of professors from Vanderbilt University. They're going to talk about these topics. All right, next to me is Professor Dr. Betsy Robinson, Associate Professor of History and Art History and Classical Studies. Next to her is Dr. Richard McGregor, Associate Professor of Religion and Islamic Studies at Vanderbilt. And next to him is Professor Dr. David Michelson, Assistant Professor of the History of Christianity. Dr. Robinson, civil wars are not unusual anywhere in the world, but this war in Syria seems to be quite far-reaching, particularly in your area of art history and classical studies. This conflict almost seems to be catastrophic in terms of what you're losing.
It's absolutely catastrophic in terms of what we're losing. Most recently, ISIL has taken the headlines, but for those 4.5 years, 5 years of civil war, there's been an all-out attack on Syrian cultural heritage.
Now, a lot of this has been focusing in Palmyra. This is a city about 130 miles northeast of Damascus. It dates all the way back to the 2nd century BC. It was once a very wealthy, diverse metropolis at the crossroads of east and west back during Roman times. There's a number of World Heritage sites that are put in the same area as Rome and Athens. Now this area is apparently under control of the ISIS state, and they're destroying a lot of these artifacts. I mean, just blowing them up.
Yeah, I mean, Palmyra was an incredible oasis city. It was the center of trade, of caravan trade, coming all the way from East Asia, meeting the Mediterranean on the coast, and now so much is gone.
Now, ISIL says these shrines and pre-Islamic sites in a lot of cases are heretical and are only worthy of oblivion. Why?
It's part of their ideology to say that. It's also tremendous hypocrisy, because at the same time that they're blowing up temples for effect and disseminating the pictures on TV, they're also looting every site that they can get their hands on and selling those artifacts on the market. And
I assume that's quite lucrative for them. They're able to take those and then sell them to collectors, or maybe in some cases museums and things like that, at least trying to.
Right. The black market is insidious, and they are flooding the market, and buyers beware.
Is there any hope of stopping this kind of destruction? This is an area that ISIL controls, and it doesn't look like it's going to flip back over to be in the hands of anybody else.
Yeah, right now they've gotten pretty far in their destructive agenda, and it's hard to imagine stopping them, although organizations are working really hard with people on the ground.
Now, all of us who are here, many people watching, care very much about things like this, but why should the average person care about this? These are old, they're out in the middle of what people would consider to be a desert, so what if they're destroyed or blown up?
Yeah, I think the fact that Palmyra and other sites in Syria have been recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage Sites really emphasizes the fact that this isn't just about Syrian culture. This is world patrimony. These are important for all of us.
And we talked about what ISIL is doing. I have also seen some reports in recent days that the other side, one of the other sides in this conflict, the Assad government, is actually sending in some pretty deadly airstrikes in that area, which I assume is also creating some destruction. So you're not only having a problem with ISIL doing this, these sites are actually caught in the crossfire of the war itself.
Yeah, and for much of the civil war, it was actually Assad troops that were dug in at Palmyra and actually involved in most of the looting and sales. So ISIS doesn't have a monopoly on the destruction of Syrian monuments.
Now, one UN official is describing what's happening in the Palmyra area as a war crime. Do you agree?
I agree.
ISIL's so intent on these efforts. I mean, this may strike pretty close to home to you. I understand there's one renowned and venerable archaeologist that's in that area who has been taken by ISIL, tortured, and beheaded.
Yeah, Khalid al-Assad, who met a terrible end on the 18th of August.
Now, I understand that there's still some, perhaps they were hoping this archaeologist might tell them where there's some other unexcavated historical sites. Why are they interested in those as well? Was that the reason he was killed?
It's hard to say why he was killed. He'd been instrumental in getting artifacts safely out of the area before ISIL moved in, so it's hard to say that he could have given them any information. Mostly it was a propagandistic and hateful crime against people who cared about
We spoke before we started that Palmyra was once much like Jerusalem in rebellion of Rome, and then it was retaken by Rome, but the Romans did not destroy many of those sites that were there, perhaps say as they did at the temple in Jerusalem. Is there anything you can compare to in modern times with this kind of destruction of historic sites being done by ISIL? Anybody else ever tried to do something like this? I can't ever remember in history that I can ever remember something quite parallels this.
In antiquity, there were, the destruction of a city was an old trope. It happened. Corinth, Carthage, and Palmyra wasn't treated well by the Romans when it was taken, but the degree of destruction that an organization like ISIS can do is just so far beyond the past. What we have now, though, is the ruining of ruins rather than just the ruining of buildings that are still in their prime.
We talked about the importance of what is sort of there at Palmyra. I understand from the story I saw in the Washington Post that some of the artwork there was actually motivation or the derivative of what became the American eagle. Is that right in our country?
Yeah, Palmyra attracted British and then French travelers in the 18th century, and they published their images of this amazing artistic complex, and it went viral across England and across Europe and eventually America, and became really important for so much of our classical decoration and iconography.
I also understand in a number of those places where you come to these inscriptions, they're not just in one language. And in a lot of cases, it gives you an opportunity to see a language that we still know today that perhaps has no longer being used, and it gives us an opportunity to understand that they're describing the same thing and helps us decipher what one of those dialects and scripts used to actually say.
Yeah, Palmyra was an incredible melting pot of people from all over the Middle East, plus across the Roman Empire, and so you see things in Greek and Latin, in Palmyrene Aramaic, just throughout the site. It was really diverse.
All right, let's take a break. We're talking with Dr. Betsy Robinson, who's Associate Professor at Vanderbilt of Art History and Classical Studies. We have a trio of Vanderbilt professors today to talk about various aspects of what's actually going on and what the impacts are of the Syrian Civil War. Back to continue our conversation after this break.
Thank you.